Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and this is my... And this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. Our Modern Classics Month schedule got a little shuffled around. I started writing about this Part 2 album and then realized, oh wow, I can't write about this album without the one that came after, and it's just spiraled out of control into one of the most personally significant videos I've ever written, so that's what's going on with that. You will be seeing Modern Classics Month Part 2 on Friday, but this is Monday, going ahead as scheduled. This week's album is The Grateful Dead, Anthem of the Sun. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab, where I post my hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls. You can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. You might be finding my written reviews somewhere else really soon. Hello, really last minute additions, seeing as I don't even have my mic on me, let alone a camera. But, as of this weekend, I am Tracking Angle's newest, and as it stands right now, only female writer. And my rookie review was the Live at Pompeii remix that just came out, the Steven Wilson one. Yeah, that was my rookie review. So that is linked in the description for your reading pleasure, as is everything these days. Thank you to the editors for trusting me with such a big project. Pompeii is definitely a heavy hitter, and Pink Floyd's become such a huge part of my life this year, unexpectedly. Thank you to the editors for bringing me on. Can't wait to write some more. And I'm really excited to be writing for another website besides my own. Yeah! That's that on that. Let's take the plastic off. I'm so excited to talk about this album because not only is this 1968 to 1970 my favorite period in Dead history, I also had a great time getting this record. So my copy is a repress with a remaster of the original 1968 mix. I picked my copy up at a place called Retro Spin Records in Monroe, Connecticut. I stopped through there on my way to see Slowdive in New York last year. It's a shame they're so far out of my way because Retrospin is a great store. I found an original uncensored Moby Grape there. I found Love in Mono there. I found Sabbath. Just a great haul. Now, let's talk about this cover art. This is some of the most unsettling art in my entire collection. I don't know what it is about this, but it has weird fucking juju. I don't get creeped out easily, but whatever it is, this does it for me. Disc and Music Echo in October of 1968 described the anthem art as frighteningly powerful and looking, quote, like a highly meticulous schizophrenic's portrait of his own stranger fantasies. Schizophrenia? No. A heavy dose of psychedelics? Yes, the Anthem of the Sun art is a painting by Bill Walker. The original painting was actually just this circle. You'd think this was for some big philosophical reason, but no, a circle's just more comfortable to work with than a square. Less corners. And what we see here is actually unfinished. Ed Thrasher added the purple background and pink text. Bill wouldn't finish the background until 1989, and the rest was finally completed in 1996, 28 years after Anthem of the Sun's release. Bill wrote a whole guide on what the anthem art is and how he made it, and you mean it's 33 pages long? Alright, Here's 33 pages in 2 minutes, I guess. In January of 1968, Phil Lesh approached Bill to do the Anthem album art. Bill ripped one of his canvas curtains down, did the basic sketch, and painted for the next 4 months. This art style overall was inspired by the cultural shift happening in the late 60s, Eastern philosophies and visual languages brought to the West. Dragons, Buddha, Vishnu, the many-headed god with blue skin, and the mandala, with the Wheel of Fire from the ancient Greeks. Getting these super intense colors was not easy. Some required 30 plus layers of paint to get this color payoff. As for the content of the painting, Anthem is a work in 6 parts: the source, the potential, the flames, serpents, masks, and the beast. Source and potential were completed in the 80s and 90s, so we'll skip those today. The outer ring is what Bill describes as the direct meaning, the flames and serpents. They form a protective circle around the masks and beasts. The serpents represent Carl Jung's serpentine path of instinct. The flames represent the ephemeral, temporal nature of life. The inner ring is the, quote, hidden meaning. The masks. The members of the Dead, Jerry, Bob, Pigpen, Phil, Mickey, and Bill, appear as the 6 heads of one monster. Quote, they are the beast's heart and voice, symbolizing the transcendence of individual limitation to achieve, as part of the band, more expansive realms of imagination and accomplishment. Why is Tom Constantin missing? Walker hadn't seen a show with him in it yet. In retrospect, he feels Tom was the center of the painting. The beast. The secret meaning. A many-eyed, dragon-headed Buddha? Meant to either represent God, the muse, or the transcendental state that all At a Dead show reach. In order to achieve transcendence, one must first confront the beast, whether that's fear, ego death, or literal death is anyone's guess. So, yeah, that was a vast oversimplification. Again, this was 33 pages long, but as a former visual artist myself, it was a fascinating read. Further reading for each of my episodes is listed on my website. Bill's Anthem guide is linked there. Bill also did an interview talking about this in 2019, but since Tales from the Golden Road nuked themselves 5 years ago, it is now lost media. What else? The background was changed to white for a time. On the back cover is a fisheye lens photo of the guys taken by Thomas Weir, no relation to Bob. On Anthem of the Sun, we have the classic era lineup of the Dead, with, of course, Jerry Garcia on guitar, vocals, percussion, and kazoo? Bob Weir on guitar, lead vocals on New Potato Caboose, and kazoo again? Pigpen McKernan on organs, claves, lead vocals on Alligator and Caution. Phil Lesh on bass, piano, harpsichord, trumpet, timpani. How the hell did they get a hold of so many kazoos? Bill Kreutzmann on drums and percussion, and introducing Mickey Hart on drums, percussion, and bells. Both guys got to play the gong, I imagine so they didn't feel left out of the kazoo brigade. And Tom Constantin contributing prepared piano devices and tape manipulation. Anthem of the Sun was produced by the Grateful Dead with Dave Hassinger and Dan Healy. Roll transition. Our story today does not begin with the Dead. It begins with a different gaggle of clinically insane motherfuckers. Not the motherfuckers, they're a totally different thing. These motherfuckers. Ken Kesey and his band of merry pranksters. Their goal? Drive cross-country to the 1964 World's Fair, taking a whole lot of LSD on the way and making it there in one piece, God willing. At the wheel? Dean Moriarty himself, Neil Cassidy. The bus came by and I got on, that's when it all began. There was Cowboy Neil at the wheel of the bus to never ever land. The pranksters tried their best to make a movie out of their journey. Paula Sunston, aka Gretchen Fetchin, did the best she could to put the footage in chronological order. They start hosting these hangouts to show their 30-hour-long film, have light shows, take LSD, and promote the use of LSD. Cue the Acid Tests. The house band of the Acid Tests? None other than the freshly minted Grateful Dead. As described by author Dennis McNally, quote, Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters and the Dead brought together groups of people to take LSD together. For those events, the Dead were not the show. They were free to play or not. The show was everyone in the room. The Dead, along with the prankster band, merely provided the soundtrack. Jerry called the Acid Tests, quote, one of the truly democratic art forms to appear this century. We had the luxury of being able to experiment freely in a situation which didn't require anything of us. For a musician, that's like carte blanche, you know? That was great fun. So why did San Francisco pop off the way it did in the mid-60s? According to Phil, quote, at that time, it was just a pleasant place to live, smack up against the Golden Gate Park and Twin Peaks.
Yes, but only one has a best friend with one arm. Harry?
No, not that one. Quote, with a few blocks of stores and restaurants and, most important, lots and lots of old Victorian houses that had been divided into flats, one for each floor. Split all those mansions up into rooms and $300 a month rent goes down to $30 a month per person. Perfect for this new hippie thing called communal living. And you bet a whole lot of music was coming out of those mansions. The Dead landed their deal with Warner in 1967, part of a wave of labels scrambling to bottle the San Francisco sound. But there really was no San Francisco sound to bottle. All the bands sounded very different. Why I need a man. That mythical sound was more of a shared spirit. That very spirit, as these labels would soon come to find out, existed in direct opposition to what they wanted. Singles. The Dead pursued music that couldn't possibly be contained by the runtime of a single LP, let alone a single. We run into this problem over and over again with counterculture bands signed to major labels. Labels want them to fall in line, but remember this, the anti-establishment band is always going to do anti-establishment shit. Speaking of anti-establishment, in February of 1968, that world in California would be rocked. Just before the Dead co-opened the Carousel Ballroom, the body of Neal Cassady was found by the train tracks in Mexico. Quote, Cassady was very possibly the most highly evolved personality the Dead would ever meet, and was certainly among their most profound life influences, other than the psychedelic experience itself. Neal's passing deeply affected the Dead, especially Bob, who had literally just written That's It for the Other One in part about his sometimes roommate Neal. According to Phil, Neal's passing shaped the music that would become Anthem. Quote, that performance at the Carousel led us to settle on the particular sequence of songs that would appear on the album. I truly believe we were channeling Neal that night. The guys worked on The Other One, New Potato Caboose, Born Cross-Eyed, Caution, and Alice D. Millionaire. Robert Hunter, who'd just come back into the fray at this time after being friends with Jerry for a while, co-wrote Alligator and wrote the lyrics of Dark Star, which would become Anthem's single. Work on Anthem began at RCA Victor Studios in September of 1967 with a new guy in tow. Right before opening up the Straight Theater, Bill Kreutzmann stumbled upon Mickey Hart. He hops on a mysteriously procured second kit for the second night of the shows. Quote, they hadn't particularly realized they were one piece shy, but they were certainly smart enough to know it when it had arrived. With the material that would become Anthem of the Sun, the guys took everything you know about how albums are supposed to be made and just threw it out the window. There was no way in hell these guys would come to a studio with material prepared, let alone play it in the same way every time, or allow outside musicians to come in. Warner exec Joe Smith said, quote, we were dealing with, yes, a counterculture, and yes, a new method of recording, but also there was the element of chemicals involved. When I tell you, these guys were high as hell. This situation is helped, or not helped, I guess it depends on who you are in this situation, by an unprecedented stipulation for recording contracts of the day: unlimited studio time. The Dead had a lot more access to the studio and therefore a lot more creative control than their peers would have had. The guys could do like, I don't know, terrorizing the studio recording the other one. I could never replicate how this man speaks. It is simply too specific and delightful, but I'll try my best. As described by TC, quote, "After the other one, I was given the interesting task of whooping it up into a further and greater frenzy, ultimately causing it to explode, and out of the rubble of the explosion and the smoke and the ashes and everything would come the delicious sounds of the new potato caboose." Here's how Phil described TC whooping it up. "At just the right moment, like an axe and chainsaw combined, the most glorious glissando poured, ripping and tearing out of the speakers, sounding just like a portcullis being lowered at a medieval castle. Our producer came halfway out of his chair, staring white-faced at us as we, giggling inanely, luxuriated in the sheer noise of it. He ran down to the main room, only to discover TC standing by the piano with a goofy smile on his face, holding a top. But the guys learning how the studio worked as they went along proved to be spectacularly inefficient. Recording was interrupted by gigs in New York in December of '67, then a 2-week tour of the Northwest with their little brother band, the Quicksilver Messenger Service. When they were actually in the studio, they were acting a fool. From Bob, quote, "I couldn't describe it back then because I didn't know what I was talking about. I do know now. A little bit of white noise and a little bit of compression. But at the time, he infamously described it as thick air. Thick air. He wants the sound of thick air. Thick air. He wants the sound of thick air. Thick air. He wants the sound of thick air, thick air. He wants the sound of thick air. Thick air. He wants the sound of thick air!" Yeah, needless to say, Dave Hassinger quit after that. Then, Warner discovered that, after sessions in California and New York, the Dead only had about 1/3 of the material needed to fill out an LP. Tensions culminated in this infamous letter from Joe Smith to the Dead's manager at the time, Danny Rifkin. Quote, "Lack of preparation, direction, and cooperation from the very beginning have made this album the most unreasonable project with which we have ever involved ourselves." Joe throws shade at Phil specifically, saying, and I quote, "Nobody in your organization has enough influence over him to evoke anything resembling normal behavior. It branded the Dead an undesirable group to work with." And how did they respond? The anti-establishment band is going to do anti-establishment shit. So, we don't have a producer, and we've lost the support of our label. What do we do now? We are the Grateful Dead, you fools! We're gonna use our live recordings! Blending live and studio recordings had never really been done like this. I mean, there are fake live albums with a live track or two thrown in, but nothing like this. With engineer Dan Healy, the guys played detective, hunting for fragments of recordings that went well together. From those fragments, they'd fill out their songs. Of course, this only further complicated the recording process. Tracks would be jam-packed with 7 guys all trying to record their parts, plus overdubs, plus all the vocals. Then you have the issue of matching up the 2-track, Franken 4-track, as I call it, which is 2 2-track machines used to make a 4-track machine, and honest-to-goodness 4-track, all recorded at different speeds. Dan had to transfer everything and manually sync it all, and you know how you did it back then sticking your thumb in the wheel and hoping for the best. Unfortunately, this process plus the particularly tricky mix on side 2 of the album severely degraded the fidelity of Anthem. And they still needed to go back into a studio. As for the title, it came from one of those esoteric weirdo books floating around the Dead's house on Ashbury Street. James Churchward's The Lost Continent of Mew. It's described as automatic writing and kind of historical fiction about the mythical continent of Mew's influence on the music of Egypt. In the book, the dead throat, an instrument made of a skull, is thought to be used to play the Anthem of the Sun. The track listing of this Anthem of the Sun goes as follows. I didn't even know when I started recording. Opening up side 1, we have That's It for the Other One, including the cryptical envelopment, the quadlibet for tender feet, the faster we go, the rounder we get, aka the other one, and We Leave the Castle. Then, New Potato Caboose, and side 1 closes with Born Cross-Eyed. Opening up side 2, we have Alligator, and the album closes with Caution, Do Not Stop on Tracks. Anthem of the Sun was released in July of 1968, and it was something of an oddball hit with critics. Though critics didn't always get TC's prepared piano stuff, Disc and Music Echo hyped the hell out of Anthem. Quote, "It's so completely unlike anything you've ever heard before that it's practically a new concept in music. It's haunting, it's pretty, it's infinite, and then zap and it's explosive and a complete mind-blower." It named Pigpen and Jerry as MVPs of the album and hailed Anthem as, quote, "one of the 5 great albums of 1968. Here's my wild guess at what the other 4 were. Obviously. And, Jim Miller for Rolling Stone went as far as to compare Anthem to what Edgar Varese was doing and called side 1 a masterpiece. The carefully crafted is thrown together with the casually tossed off, and the results are spliced together. The end product is one of the finest albums to come out of San Francisco. To be sure, the album has its weak points, but as a total work, it is remarkably successful, especially when compared to the first Dead album. Despite all this, Anthem was a commercial flop. The promo single Dark Star with Born Cross-Eyed on the B-side was released in May, but it wasn't much of a promo effort at all, seeing as only 1,600 copies were made, and of those 1,600, only 500 sold. This thing really only sold within the San Francisco crowd, and it was released within a rapidly changing cultural landscape. Political tensions were heating up big time in America through 1968. The US deployed 24,000 troops to Vietnam in response to the Tet Offensive, and a wave of anti-war protests followed, including the Columbia University takeover, the first one, in April. The very takeover that the Dead played. They found their jokester vibe was completely mismatched to the severity of the situation at hand. Real life came knocking on the Dead's door. Of course, you have the death of Neil Cassidy, but back in October of 67, 710 Ashbury Street was raided. All the guys who were there were busted for possession. It effectively forced them from San Francisco to Hollywood. Dan Healy jumped ship to work with the Quicksilver Messenger service. Bear Stanley comes back as sound guy, but his lab gets busted with 350,000 doses of LSD. Holy shit, dude. The carousel closed with the San Francisco sound entirely commodified at this point. The hippies saw the writing on the wall. The Diggers hosted a funeral for the Summer of Love. Haight Ashbury went from hippie heaven to tourist trap. What goes up must come down. On the music-specific end of things, 3 weeks before Anthem of the Sun's release, the band dropped their musical A-bomb, Music from Big Pink. It was a watershed moment in pop music history, birthing a new direction for giants like the Byrds and a particularly influential group on the Dead, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. All of this, the cultural shift, the musical shift, and just how far out Anthem had gone, made the Dead do a heel turn. They tied up the loose ends with I asked for pronunciation help in the comments of the American Beauty episode, and I got a different answer from everyone who commented. This new way of music making blossomed on Workingman's Dead. But back to Anthem. What do I think of Anthem of the Sun? It's psychedelic jamming with hints of Stockhausen and some whack-ass album art. On paper, that period seems like a no-brainer for me, but Anthem can present a challenge. I found it intimidating. There was nothing like this at the time. And this is one of the first true studio live album hybrids in rock and roll, if not the first. It doesn't so much flow from studio to live material as it employs musical jump cuts, collages, and montages. Not unlike a psychedelic film. Jerry would always say they mixed it for the hallucinations. This is an aggressively visual piece of music. I feel that Dan Healy was the backbone of Anthem. We know how the Dead are. They are consistently inconsistent. There is no such thing as a flawless recording end to end. Dan synced the best parts of something like 18 shows together to assemble these songs. I also have to tip my hat to Jerry and Phil for the mix. Each side was performed all the way through. No breaks, no punch-ins. If someone f***ed up, you'd have to restart the tape and do the whole thing all over again. In the days before digital recording technology, mixing was just as much a performance as playing. And I think a lot of modern listeners forget that. Of course, there is the LSD of it all. Jerry, in that wise, cryptic way, said the acid tests gave the Dead, quote, glimpses into the form that follows chaos. If you throw everything out and lose all rules and stop trying to make anything happen on any level, other stuff starts to happen. That very essence, the process of losing all rules and other stuff happening, is distilled on its opener. What I believe to be its crown jewel, that's it for the other one. Phil's Thousand Petal Lotus. The other one evolved into something damn near unrecognizable through the 70s as it splintered off from the first movement, Cryptical Envelopment. Or, as it's spelled on my back cover, Envelopement. So I could have just been saying this thing wrong the entire time. Great! Because we all know how normal you are when I do that. And we're dropped right into this thing. There's all of one note from Pigpen on the organ before Jerry begins. There's no time to brace ourselves. And from the sounds of it, this is gonna be some head trip ritual. The other day they waited, the sky was dark and faded. Solemnly they stated, he has to die. That's it for the other one. Starts out behaving like a normal rock and roll song of the time. Jerry's sweet, youthful voice sings through the aggressively melodic envelopment, accented by those stop times that I couldn't resist doing, and jazzy licks. It is a shame this part was ditched live. It's iconic. We cut to Jerry's voice run through a Leslie speaker, giving it that watery effect. It's almost hymnal, again giving the feeling of a ritual with organ and acoustic guitar playing classical motifs. The chorus melody repeats, and all of a sudden, it kicks in. Unless my math is really, really wrong, which, knowing me, it could be, the quadlibet only lasts all of 20 seconds, but it's some of the most fascinating 20 seconds recorded in all of rock and roll. Or assembled, rather. It's made up of 4 different shows at the Carousel, King's Beach Bowl, and the Shrine Auditorium, all played on top of each other. They all start at the same point, but slowly they diverge. One's a little faster here, one takes a detour there, the solos are stepping all over each other, 8 drum kits are beating in all corners, everything's held together by little more than a thread. Then, the bloom closes again, making you wonder if you even heard anything at all, and brings us back to the Carousel. The faster we go, the rounder we get. The other one. A front row view of the beast. Jerry's playing some great licks. I love how green and wily Bob's singing voice is, and there's something terribly exciting about him always sounding like he's out of breath. But the star of the show is the rhythm section. Bill and Mickey make me feel like I'm trapped in a whirlpool. pull deeper down as I swirl. It's claustrophobic as hell. Pigpen shocks the space between, what little space there is between verses, with these energetic fills. And if you can find him in this chaos, Phil is a treat to listen to. He wore his deep knowledge of classical music and free jazz on his sleeve. On top of that, he treated his bass like another guitar part. His playing here has a complicated relationship with the melody, but I really like it. They don't sound anything alike, but this deep circle lock reminds me of Bitches Brew. Ironically enough, The Dead and Miles Davis were on the same bill. The other one bursts into one of these classically Dead glows of light. This tone on Jerry's SG is just iconic. Dead. It's the guitar sound I think of when I think of the Grateful Dead. Phil plays a brief turnaround, linking with a cut to the envelopment reprise. There's another claustrophobic, messy collage blast. The collective bellow of "you know he had to die" sounds like 1,000 pointing fingers condemning me to the gallows. I just got here, man! The fourth and final movement creeps in on us. The music fights back against it for a little bit, then surrenders to the dragon's breath. Full disclosure, I welcome noise in my rock and roll. The scratches on the piano strings blew my mind wide open. I remember feeling dread when I first heard this. Something's wrong. I'm lost in the woods. I want to go home. But it's less frightening now that I have that mental image of Dave Hassinger running down the stairs of the studio in a panic because he heard Tom from 2 floors up and thought that something exploded. That's it for the other one. Is 4 different Grateful Deads at play. The pop sensibility, the psychedelic band, the jam band in a live setting, and guys who were high as hell and just wanted to make weird sounds. After hearing it for the first time, I felt like I died and come back to life. This feeling only slightly diminishing over the 7 months I've been playing it speaks to its power. This leads into the sweet, sweet sounds of the new potato caboose, cradling my mind and ears after the ultra shock to the consciousness I just received. It's something akin to the feeling of transitioning from Rev 9 to Goodnight. Everything is okay again, but it feels wrong still. We can't go back to the way we were after that. There's these beautiful little touches like the Celeste and I think harp from Pigpen, the harpsichord by Phil, gong by either Mickey or Bill, possibly both. In that extended section, hearing Jerry's comfort lick, every guitarist has one, glitters like a sparkler in the night. We hear the budding use of harmonies that would come to blossom over the next 3 studio albums. Use of feedback and effects let slips of smoke rise. So much was going on during the other one that we didn't get to hear the interplay of Jerry and Phil, but we hear it on the caboose. Intertwined like long, thin garden snakes. It doesn't feel like this is an 8-minute song at all. In my mind, it's more like 5. If there's anything Anthem leaves me wanting, it's gotta be Dark Star. It's a top 5 60s Dead song, a top 10 Dead song period, maybe. It's great to have its B-side though, and another top 10 Dead... Wrong album! And another top 10 Dead song for me, Born Cross-Eyed. Looking at the runtime, this is deceptively simple, but on Born Cross-Eyed alone, we have 2 drum kits, lead vocals, harmony vocals, guitar parts, overdubs of guitars, 2 organ parts, an acoustic guitar, cymbals, and an extra snare drum. And Bob's Thick Hair. I like to think they included that as a fuck you to Dave specifically. Like the other one, we have no time to brace ourselves. It opens with spring-tight guitar notes. It boots us right into this dizzying, manic, messy live energy. I forget exactly who, but someone in Anthem to Beauty described Born Cross-Eyed as an autobiographical song. It's like trucking on mescaline, bidding each city goodbye as you head out to the next. To me, this also reads like death with the possibility of reincarnation. Bob Wonders seems seems I have been here before. Death was on the guys' minds. They just lost Neil. But it doesn't feel heavy. Born Cross-Eyed is lively and zany, with Pigpen's Vox Continental lighting the thing up like a switchboard, and Phil's batshit trumpet section. Phil on bass and Jerry on the vibra slap under the bye and byes hit some absolutely wrong notes. Well, wrong, and buzzing in discordant tones. It's one of my favorite textures on the whole record. The Dead, for the most part, stopped playing Alligator and Caution after Pigpen passed, but not because no one could sing them. It's true, Pigpen had this raspy voice that came from the gut. Alligator was way out of his bluesman comfort zone, with Robert Hunter's goofy lyrics about a whiskey-drinking, canoe-riding reptile. And the Kazoo Brigade. Wait, oh my god. How do I play this? Yes! They didn't stop playing it because they couldn't. Clearly anyone can join the Kazoo Brigade. They stopped in part because people wouldn't stop requesting it. Alligator was their free bird. And I see why. It's a lot of fun. From the delightfully unserious Kazoo Brigade to the dance section loaded up with claves and other wood percussion. There's no negative space to fill with Bill and Mickey. They fill every slot. And of course, Pigpen is playing circles around everyone on the Hammond. Each member of the group rises to his challenge. Jerry's playing bright and warm like the sun on the alligator's back, elaborating upon the hard, spiky texture until it softens. It suddenly snaps to a jump cut, the one that was a bitch for Jerry and Phil to mix, because this section was recorded at a different speed than everything else. I believe this was 30 IPS, inches per second, and the rest was 15. Man, that's a lot of tape. Constant flip-flops between recording fidelity may annoy some, but I don't mind. Alligator fades into Caution. This one has a long history with the Dead. Back when they were the Warlocks, they had a regular gig at this place by the train tracks. They were jamming on a Them song when the rumble of the trains would go by. Being this group of guys, they started jamming with the trains. Caution is this rumbling roar, just like a passing train chugging along. There's lots of cymbal work, like the clattering on the tracks and the bell at the crossing. It's a showcase for Pigpen's bluesy sensibility. Hear his distant yelps as he leans back from the mic in bliss, and his nod to Mojo Hand. Of course, being an Anthem track, there's lots of intentional weirdness, a brief chipmunk speed section, a symptom of their tape speed dilemma, and various frenetic cuts between gigs and sections of the song. There's one bit where the song just completely falls apart before cutting back to something else and then devolving into 4 minutes of feedback. And that's Anthem of the Sun, gone just as quickly as it came. Considering all of its goofiness, there's a pervasive darkness about Anthem, some gravitational force that pulls you in and messes with your comfort level. You're always on the edge of surrendering yourself to dance or running screaming out of the house. Artist Bill Walker said, quote, "Anthem of the Sun means Song of the Sun, and the implied reference is not only to the great solar blaze that brings light and life to a darkened world, but also the illuminating blaze of consciousness that is capable of penetrating to the very heart of darkness." About joining the Dead, TC said it, quote, "wasn't as difficult or strange coming from where I was coming from, and B, with the fact that everyone was making it up as they went along. It was a state of excitement, flux, chaos even." That word's come up a few times today. Chaos. And there are children screaming outside my window. I think that's why this era of the band is so fascinating to me, because it was never sustainable. It was too taxing on their label, too out there to appeal to mainstream audiences, too temporal to ever replicate, entirely subject to the guys' relationships with each other. It was all the chaos of following the proverbial bus, the spirit of the thing, wherever it took them, even if it was sometimes driven off the road and stuck in the desert. In his book, Phil said, quote, "There's one misconception about the Grateful Dead that I'd like to clear up, if I can find the damn page. There we go. That I'd like to clear up once and for all. The legend of the master plan. When I say our goal was, or we decided, it's not as if I'm describing conscious decisions made in the now. From the beginning, every one of our moves was powered by deep waves in the group unconsciousness." The Beast. In structure, song, and style, I could say Anthem is daring, but that would be an understatement. It isn't so much once in a lifetime as it is once in a timeline. The fire in the belly, illuminating the darkness. Anthem of the Sun is the exact point in uncharted territory where you must turn back. How exciting it is to hold the torch at the end of the hall. My favorites on this album are... fuck it. Everything. It's only 5 songs. If you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays and the Friday videos, the modern classics, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That is Anthem of the Sun. I think this is the earliest I will go back in Grateful Dead albums. I don't see myself covering the first because I'm not as interested in it. From here out, I'll either cover Live Dead or Europe 72, Working Men's, of course, and then I really want to get into the Donna Jean period, because I want to write a podcast episode about her, and I feel that history of the Dead is also really interesting. I'd also really, really love to write a podcast episode about the women of the Merry Pranksters. But what do you think of this album? What do you think of the Grateful Dead? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. And so does your purple plastic kazoo. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Mondays at 11, new episode of my podcast every other Friday at noon, and God willing, part 2 of Modern Classics Month will be up this Friday, May 16th. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you Friday. Bye.